So Maria Cecilia Quiñones Peña and Keith Swartz, they're speaking from Elevate. So respectively, they're senior project manager and on the National Strategic Engagement team. So Elevate is a nonprofit organization dedicated to designing and implementing energy efficiency programs that lower costs, protect the environment, and ensure the benefits of energy efficiency reach those who need them most. In this role, Ms. Quiñones Peña provides tailored services to property owners, managers, developers to meet their high performance property goals. So I would like to welcome you both. Keith, Maria, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. We have such a short amount of time, so let me get us started by sharing our deck.
Perfect. And hello, Keith, nice to see you again.
Hey.
Hey, I had a very nice dinner that time. You guys were more than kind to take me out. Oh boy. When I left that meal, I was like, I ordered a couple things there. I didn't realize that they were going to be treating me. This is a little rude. I'm like having multiple dishes. I didn't realize. I was just socially awkward. My apologies. So it's very generous of you guys to take me out for a very nice dinner. Okay.
I remember well.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again for the opportunity to talk, Sean, and everyone in the team. We're just really grateful to be part of the discussion and grateful to be able to share what we've been learning. Keith and I are going to be talking about our work in electrifying a historic co-op called the Zoe Bayless Student Housing Co-op in Madison, Wisconsin. You kind of already know who we are. Sean introduced us. We're Elevate. We're a national nonprofit. And in our work, we're just striving to ensure that the benefits of clean and efficient energy, gets to the folks that need it most. That's low-income folks, people of color, environmental justice communities, et cetera. And actually, I'll wait to dive in a little bit, but I want to tell you a little bit more about the Zoe Bayless house itself. And as an FYI, I will try to monitor the chat, but Sean or anyone, if you can just pipe up if there's anything that we can answer, happy to do that during the presentation.
Thank you. I'll do that.
Okay, awesome. So the Zoe Bayless house is actually owned by the Madison Community Co-op. MCC, that's what we call them, is a nonprofit housing co-op that provides low-cost, not-for-profit cooperative housing for very low to moderate income people. And they really strive to be inclusive of underrepresented and marginalized groups. On the right here, you can see kind of snapshots of the 11 homes they own so far. That's 11 homes, over 200 members or residents that live in those homes. And the average cost per month to live in an MCC home or co-op is about $535 for both rent and utilities. So they really do strive to provide affordable housing. The Zoe Bayless house is this home on the right. It's located near the University of Wisconsin Madison campus, right by the lake. This historic co-op was built in 1928 for sorority, actually. And actually, just to back up a little bit, I did want to state that the co-op or co-ops is a shared house model where each member or resident has equal control over the operations of the house. And that includes making decisions related to decarbonization, electrification, and anything that touches the building itself. The building is about 12,000 square feet, and it is 24 bedrooms with shared bathrooms, shared living quarters, shared commercial or large kitchen, things like that. And the members collectively pay utility bills, so they're really invested in ensuring that these buildings are operated in tip-top shape. So the reason we even started working with MCC, actually, one more thing. The Zoe Bayless house is actually just recently renamed Zoe Bayless. It used to be called the Marsha P. Johnson home, but the Zoe Bayless Student Housing Cooperative was actually looking for a place to live. There'd been, it has a history of being displaced by the University of Madison. Actually, you can read all about it in the news, but they finally found a home with MCC in an MCC's building, and the Zoe Bayless Student Housing Co-op is specifically for women and non-binary students attending the university. But so just to kind of give you a sense of how we got connected to them. Basically, their original 1920s boiler failed in 2021, and they sought this kind of emergency as a point to really make a big transition away from fossil fuels. So they contacted us, and basically we're like, how can you help? And so we said, actually, we're just starting a brand new program called the Building Electrification Program, which is focused in the Midwest. And we have a little bit of funding, and let's just figure it out. So what you see here on the screen is a list of everyone who's been involved in the design and construction. We're about 90% complete with construction, but it includes the Madison Community Co-op, obviously, as the building owner. We reached out to Block Power for some financing support. We have Harker, who is providing the HVAC support for that. Westfall is on the electrical side. Superior Renovation Solutions is more the general contractor. And then we also included the Madison Gas and Electric utility that provides the service to the property. So it really is a coalition or an ecosystem of people that need to get together to really design a good solid electrification project, essentially. And I wanted to point out that at Elevate, and probably this whole team here, we think about decarbonizing buildings in terms of 4 pillars. You have energy efficiency, electrification, adding renewable electric supply, usually in the form of solar photovoltaic or rooftop solar or something like that. And then finally, figuring out how to manage electric loads. And because this MCC came to us kind of in an emergency, the priority was to replace the boiler with a heat pump alternative, something like that. So we didn't, and the other factor was that this is a historic building. So we couldn't just say, oh, insulate your walls and insulate your roof line. They had done some of that here and there, but it is virtually impossible for such a complicated building. But also it can be really tough if you want to maintain the historic integrity of the property. So we did kind of skip a couple of things from the energy efficiency side and moved right into electrifying the space heating. We definitely want to do air sealing insulation, but again, we couldn't make it happen within the timeline that we're working with. I do want to say, though, that MCC has done their own kind of energy efficiency strategies. For example, adding storm windows. They did a whole lighting retrofit to LEDs. So they've been kind of piecemealing it since before we were introduced to them, and we'll continue to do that after that. They also already had a solar array installed on the roof. And if I go back to this screen, you can kind of see it. It's very small, but it's there. So they've already kind of taken, leadership in terms of reducing their energy costs here and there. So I am going to pass off the next couple of slides to Keith, who has been really the technical expert in all of this, and he'll tell you more about what work we actually did. Take it away, Keith.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. Yeah, we'll start with the heating and cooling system. Now, the building's heating and cooled with a variable refrigerant flow, or VRF system. 34 indoor units are connected to these 2 outdoor units. And you notice they're up on a high stand. Now, some of you Californians may wonder why they're so far off the ground. Is to get it up above the snow. Some of the indoor units are ducted, like ones that serve the common areas. The units in the residential rooms are ductless mini split systems. And we'll see those in a picture a little bit later. Air is continuously exhausted from the bathrooms, and it passes through a heat exchanger to precondition the incoming makeup air. The material in the heat exchanger lets moisture pass through, so it not only cools the outside air in the summer, but also dehumidifies it. Okay, on to the next slide. All right, can I control it? Yeah, there we go. And cold climate heat pumps are capable of operating down to temperatures as cold as like 15 below zero, which is pretty cold, but sometimes the temperature gets even colder than that. And for those cold snaps, we need another heating source. And in this building, we use electric heaters, electric resistance heaters. Now, ideally, the electric heater would be controlled by the same thermostat as the heat pump, but the additional cost to do that was more than $30,000. We didn't think it was worth it. So the electric heaters have their own thermostat. And to keep the electric heaters off as much as possible, their thermostats will be set at a temperature cooler than the set point for the heat pumps. And we'll have to trust that the residents won't mess with those settings. It's something that the maintenance people will have to keep an eye on. Not every room has a heat pump or an electric heater. Those rooms get conditioned with outside air from the dedicated outside air system, or they're heated and cooled indirectly from the nearby rooms. The exhaust air ducts and the supply air ducts from the dedicated outside air system get to the upper floors through a new shaft that was cut through closets. They were stacked on top of each other. And there were also a lot of holes that were cut into walls to get the refrigerant pipes where they needed to go. So, a fair amount of destruction in this fairly historic building. That's the way it goes sometimes. Okay, on the next photo. Okay, here are the photos of some indoor units. And you can see some of the artwork that we had to cover up as part of that too. It's really interesting artwork in this building. Okay, on to the energy numbers. Let's start with natural gas. Like Maria said, the old heating system was a steam boiler and radiators, and that's gone now. So that saves us about 600,000 or 6,000 therms a year. Natural gas is still used for water heaters. We considered heat pump water heaters, but decided against them, at least for now, because there are issues with manifolding heat pump water heaters together in a centralized system, and we didn't want to deal with that in this building. So they might install heat pump water heaters sometime in the future, but not now. Okay, next slide, we'll look at electrical. And the electrical consumption goes up for three reasons. First, we're heating with electricity instead of natural gas. The second reason electricity goes up is that we're adding cooling. And the third reason is we're adding ventilation. So while these increase the utility cost of the building and the energy use, it improves the air quality and the comfort and just quality of life inside the home. Okay, and on to the next slide, we'll take a look at the overall energy use. All in kBTUs to get them in equivalent units. The overall energy use goes down. And overall, the cost goes up because per BTU in Madison, electricity is just more expensive than natural gas. We're switching to a more expensive fuel. Now, these numbers don't take into account the solar PV system, which historically has generated about 2,500 kWh per year. And you can see the carbon savings numbers too. Okay, now how much does all this cost? The mechanical work from Harker is a little over $500,000. The electrical work from Westfall, around 200,000. Other work by Superior, around 100,000. That other work includes cutting all the holes, building the shaft for the vertical ducts, and building walls around the ducted units that are near those common areas. So the grand total is $856,000. This program that Elevate runs contributed $288,000, leaving $568,000 for the building owner. And next slide.
I can take over from
Okay,
here.
back to you then.
And I want to just add one last thing on this last slide on the cost information, that this 568,000 is where Block Power came in with their basically clean energy financing product that they offer. And we can talk more about it if you'd like, but that's how the rest of it is being financed.
Oh, I think that is worth talking about. And I was also just going to mention, Keith, that one of our last presenters is Andy McNamara, and he's done almost 400 central boilers now that are, I think that's total in his life, but in California, he's done upwards of 100 heat pump boilers now, retrofits, and most of them have been using the CO2 stand-ins that would work fine in Wisconsin. So I thought if you can stick around to see his presentation. So thank you. And yeah, tell us a little bit more about Block Power. That's like someone you even presented earlier from Block Power, but we're still like, what exactly, how does Block Power do it? Totally interested.
Yeah, they essentially bring in the capital at the beginning of the construction period. So all of these, contractors are paid up front for the cost of the work, but part of it is that MCC essentially, as the owner, has to pay back on a monthly basis through any savings incurred or not. But it's for the term of the lease, which for this project is 15 years. So essentially, once we finish construction, an HVAC entity will continue to monitor the equipment to make sure that it is performing as it is intended to and producing the savings or just the performance that we expect it to. After the 15 years, after MCC finishes paying off the cost of this lending product, the equipment is then taken back to or transferred. Sorry. The equipment ownership is transferred back to MCC and no longer Block Power. So this is just one of the kind of models that we thought was helpful for someone who, like MCC, who doesn't have, $568,000 just waiting in a bank somewhere. Yeah, just that's the brief description of how Block Power and what Block Power's lending product is like here.
Got it. So if I was to summarize that back, it's a loan that's a subsidized loan specifically, and it's a 15-year term loan, and it's paid back through, at least it's intended to be paid back through utility bill savings.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Cool.
And so really quick, go ahead, Sean.
Well, Jenny Lowe wanted to know how low is the interest rate?
Oh, Keith, do you remember?
I don't recall off the top.
Yeah, it was comparable or less than a pretty standard like bank loan. But it didn't, a bank loan obviously doesn't come with the oversight over 15 years to ensure that the pieces of equipment are being, maintained and performing accordingly. So we thought it was a better deal.
Thank you.
And something else I think is worth mentioning too is that, since Block Power owns the equipment, they also maintain it for those 15 years too.
Exactly. So to kind of end our presentation and go into the Q&A, we just wanted to share really quickly what we've learned so far. The construction work isn't complete. Like I mentioned earlier, we're about 90% complete. So we're almost done and are really excited to see it actually operating and have, the Zoe Bayless women and non-binary students move in and see what they think come May. So, but what we've learned so far is that, creating high quality, low carbon, affordable housing in historic buildings will actually may cause energy costs to increase depending on your location and the cost of electricity, even if we're decreasing energy use and carbon emissions. So that's just something that we just need to be more aware of. At MCC's Zoe Bayless house, the upgrades added improved comfort, like Keith said, for the residents from central air conditioning where it didn't exist before. They had no cooling at all, and improved indoor air quality from the added ventilation. So when we had actually modeled this before, during the design process and before going into construction, and MCC was totally on board with having that added cost if it presented all of these benefits. And just kind of last but not least, understanding the challenges associated with upgrading historic buildings is really essential to avoid leaving them behind in the climate mitigation efforts and just a clean energy transition in general. These upgrades and the benefits they bring are the start of a low carbon and resilient affordable housing for all. At least that's how we see it. So we just don't shy away from these types of buildings and continue to kind of seek them out and learn from them. And just a little bit on what's next. Aside from finishing this project, MCC, they're really on board with removing fossil fuels from their portfolio. So they want to decarbonize all of their co-ops eventually. This is just the very first step to doing so in Zoe Bayless. As Keith also mentioned, we still need to do the domestic water heater. We actually have taken a look at Sanco and our, for this kind of first phase, we just decided to focus on the space heating and cooling. But yeah, Sanco is definitely on our minds. We also need to transition away from stoves and figure out a better solution for kind of a commercial shared stove. Additionally, MCC plans to utilize the local utility Madison Gas and Electric's demand response program to better manage their energy use and lower their energy costs. So essentially taking advantage of the residential time of use rates. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. We also want to just kind of take a look at upgrading the existing solar PV panels or system to offset increased electricity use. As I mentioned earlier, the system there is very small. We actually couldn't confirm or need to confirm their functionality. It's kind of been on and off. So it might actually need to be just completely upgraded in a brand new system, bigger system put in instead. So that's just another thing we're looking at. And then last but not least, we want to do all of the above while informing ourselves on the IRA and other local incentives that might help them pay for it. Because financing did prove to be a really big challenge for MCC and actually for a lot of folks who we work with that are focused on providing affordable housing. And I just wanted to share a quote by our DeMonte January. He's MCC's membership coordinator and he's been there since 2020. And the quote he gave us was, "It's important to do these kinds of projects if you want your buildings to be around for the next 20 or 30 years. You have to start thinking, how can we not just renovate or remodel the building, but make it more sustainable for the future? The way we heat and cool our home is changing. The systems we've been using are from a time gone by. And if we're planning ahead, we need to think of more sustainable options. By doing this at MCC, we're getting our homes ready for the future, for future repairs and future projects when the new technology will be the norm." And I will end with that. This is Keith and my contact information if you want to talk to us separately, but happy to. I'm going to get off of presentation mode so I can see some faces and also see the chat and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is amazing and inspiring. I grew up in Madison, right? And there used to be like a coal plant in the middle of town. Yeah. Like the transition is amazing. Thank you so much for leading it. So there's a bunch of questions for you. Louis Diaz and Kathy Durbin, they were asking, your carbon emissions should go down as the grid becomes cleaner. And how clean is the electric grid right now? Like what maybe percentages renewables in Madison or in Wisconsin or whatever is the bubble you're sort of analyzing? People just, yeah.
Do you know the answer to that, Keith? How clean is a?
I don't have a good answer to that.
Okay.
The carbon rates that we used are a statewide average because that's what we needed to use for our program. It's not utility specific.
I know that Wisconsin is not, unfortunately, a leader in grid-based renewables, so it's probably one of the dirtier states. So,
I think Madison Gas and Electric is a little ahead of everybody else in the state.
Yes. Bruce Nils, though, he's an activist who helped make Madison green, like helped them shut down one of the coal plants, and he would disagree. Quite some stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, everyone gets to share some credit on that. So Jenny Lowe wants to know, for the loan from Block Power, how low is their interest rate? Oh, you answered that already. It was like maybe a little bit below market rate and came with lots of extra value.
Correct.
Martin Volker asks, when ownership is transferred, That's the HVAC system. How does MCC avoid taxes?
Oh, man. I don't know the answer to that question, actually.
It might be,
I don't know, I hadn't thought of that.
maybe it's worthless at that point
Yeah,
because 15
it's
years.
at the end of life, so it's worthless anyway. So
Yeah.
pay taxes on zero and zero.
There you go. Then, and it's not necessarily going to break in 15 years, but so Nick Peterson wants to ask, since energy costs went up, did MCC just cover costs with rent increases? Or I would say, have you added solar to the roof to drive the bill back down?
The solar has not, their solar system does exist at the property, but it's not functioning optimally. So the plan is to fix it, figure it out, how to optimize solar generation there. But as far as we're concerned, MCC is not increasing rents to cover the cost or to cover the monthly payment to block power. They have some reserves, operational reserves, to be able to do that. And they're also figuring out how to make changes in other buildings in their portfolio to save energy and kind of build that into a rotating fund to help not increase rents to residents, because ultimately their mission is to provide affordable housing and the residents could not be the ones to take on the bill.
Those were remarkably low costs that I saw at the beginning.
Yes.
Wow.
535 average. It's pretty low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you saw at the beginning, they have 11 properties and they're all fairly old, like around a century old.
Mhm.
So yeah, there are others that need some TLC as well.
Yeah, college student housing is famously kind of beaten down. And those
Yeah.
parties, Madison parties. Okay, so Jenny Lowe wants to know how long are the lifespans for heat pumps and water heaters, and 15 plus to 25 years?
20 years, something like
Around
that.
15 years.
Yeah.
Martin Volker asks, has the ventilation concept taken lessons from COVID, the way that you thought out the ventilation?
Not doing anything different than we would have done 5 or 10 years ago. Like we don't. Yeah.
See, okay, Leslie Gomez, if you want to go to look at her house, she'd like some recommendations on her HVAC system. She's over at
We'll take a look.
let's see.
How's you free next weekend?
There you go. Leslie Arden comments, we're using Electrify on replacement instead of replace on burnout. Electrify on replacement instead of replace on burnout. And we're avoiding the word ban altogether. So she's saying language-wise, they're using Electrify on replacement.
Mm-hmm. I
Electrify
like that.
Okay. Thank you for the messaging assistance there, Leslie. Electrify on replacement. That's a very nice, calm, sweet.
It is soothing, isn't it?
Yeah. To replace something. A burnout is just not a very nice thing. Tom Cabot says, one interesting model to form in Wisconsin might be sunworks.org to help put in low-cost solar while providing free training for volunteers. It's like solar barn raising, and they do heat pump water heaters now too. And Tom, of course, is with that organization and does that work down in like Silicon Valley area, helping out people barn raising style.
Interesting. We'll look into that. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. Wisconsinites know how to do barn raising.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, absolutely, proudly. Bob Guimarin says, I commend all the organizations and individuals involved in MCC. They're truly leading societal shifts that impact climate by promoting cooperative housing and lifestyles. And yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, they're so cool. I encourage everyone to go to Madison Community Co-op's website. They're also just super side note, but I feel like they really are not just getting on the brand wagon when it comes to equity and, you know, talking about Black Lives Matter and things like that. They're really doing the work and make it very clear and make the position very radical in the best of ways. And I really, really love them as an organization. I'm very proud to be working with them.
As a radical activist myself, I felt like my upbringing in Madison, where it was absolutely a part of that. You know, yeah. It was on so many different levels, eye-opening, and so sad that so much of rural Wisconsin doesn't really hang out in Madison and get the benefits, because there's an education there.
That's where it's at. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good on MCC.
I lived in a similar communal housing arrangement my last year of college, so it kind of brought back some memories for me to go back in a place like that.
It's good for people. Pete Marsh says, Rewiring America uses this concept: keep existing machines until it reaches the end of life and electrify them. Do pre-wiring to be ready for replacement, since 85% of space heating and water heating replacements occur under emergency circumstances, when the machine dies without warning. So focus on pre-wiring. And personally, I advocate for retrofit ready, like 120 volt, 900 watt devices that, or 1400 watt, depending upon the circuit that you're working with. Because the Rewiring America implies that you're going to rewire the house. And we already heard earlier that there was like a 1.5 year wait for a service upgrade for the apartment complex that they were working on. So that Jack was reporting at that, like that's getting rewiring an apartment complex is incredibly difficult.
Yes.
Like, leave it's
Absolutely.
expensive on the side, just
Yes.
will it even happen? Okay, so we've run out of time. Is there anything else you want to say? Because I want to thank you both so much. It was excellent.
Thank you. We're really grateful for the
No,
invite.
thanks for inviting us. It's our
Yeah,
pleasure to do this.
Exactly. Invite us again, please. We love it here.
Absolutely. We're gonna have an in-person event next summer. We'll see. We only can fit 50 people. So you have to like send like one person from your organization. You guys can do a lot.
All right. I'm ready to fight Keith for it. Thanks.
It comes with massage therapists. It comes with childcare. It's all organic food. Yeah. We're gonna have a good
I'm
time.
sold. You're done, Keith. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
All right, see ya.
Thanks, Keith. Nice to see you again. And send my hellos on to the rest of the dinner table and express my apologies for my social awkwardness.